Welcome back, Beyond the New and all that jazz. It's time to talk about some books. Today, Miss Katya was just being needy from the jump, so she's here, thriving, living her best life. So today, we are going to be talking about the books that I got to in the month of January. This was a very packed reading month for me with a lot of great reads. So I'm going to have to be a little bit briefer about a lot of them because I read 24 things in the month of January. So we're going to just dive straight into some stats. So for the first time this year, I'm actually doing like tracking and doing more stats and stuff. So I did get the spreadsheet from, I believe her name's Allie at Hardback Hoarder. I'll try to find the video where she talks about it and link it down below if you're interested in the spreadsheet. So when I pop up little stats and stuff on the screen, they're just coming from that spreadsheet, and I've edited it a little bit, but not too much. So let's just jump into these reading stats, shall we? So like I said, I read 24 books in the month of January, and of those 24 books, 10 of them were manga volumes, one of them was a graphic novel, 12 of them were full-length novels, and one of them was a novella. And that added up to 8,446 pages. And I did a lot of mix of like immersion reading this month or audiobooking or supplementing with audiobooking. And so I had 62.1 hours of audiobook time. And my average star rating was 4.2 stars. And of the 24 things that I read this month, 17 of them were from the library. And one of my goals, at least for the first half of this year, while we're trying to be very like frugal to save up to move, I am trying to read at least half of the stuff that I read. I'd like it to be from the library. And so that is obviously more than half, so yay me, we're on track. And 2 of these books were rereads, and it means that I started 9 new series, which don't know that I love that for me, but I loved a lot of my reads, so we'll just go with it. Age range wise, I read 13 adult books and 11 YA, so we're slightly skewed towards the adult, but we're kind of pretty close to a 50-50. And star rating wise, I had 1 2.75 star read, 3 3.5 star reads, 4 3.75 star reads, 4 4-star reads, 2 4.25 star reads, 4 4.5s, and I had 6 5-star reads, which friggin' love that for me. And genre breakdown wise, surprising absolutely nobody. 20 of the 24 things that I read were fantasy, and I read 2 mystery books, and I also read 2 sci-fi books. So there's a little bit, there's a teensy bit of dabbling. So now we'll just jump into talking about the individual books. As usual, we will go in ascending star order. So the first thing that I'll talk about is my least favorite book of the month, and then I'll work all the way up to my favorite book of the month. At the very end, briefly, I'll touch on the manga and graphic novel. I was going to say graphic novels, but I only read one, so graphic novel that I read in the month of January. And like always, there'll be timestamps and everything down below if you want to skip ahead to anything in particular. So with that being said, my least favorite read of the month would be my 2.75 star read. And this was Another Dimension of Us by Mike Albo. This just did not hit for me at all. This was kind of I classified it as sci-fi because I think that's what it is, but it was trying to be kind of like Stranger Things-esque. So it was trying to have that like multi-dimensional, multi-timeline type situation. And I just don't know how successful it was. I didn't love the characters. It was a little bit confusing. I thought it was going to have a little bit more of like a queer romance element, and it did kind of, but not really. And then it was in the YA age range, but then it was very heavy on like 80s references. So I'm just kind of like, who is this for? And yeah, I just did not love that one. But we'll just move right along to my 3.5 star read of the month, and that was Ogres by Adrian Tchaikovsky. So this was chosen from the mug of magical mysteries or whatever. I haven't decided what to call it, but one of you recommended this to me, and it got chosen by RN Jesus to be my read for January. And this was a sci-fi novella, and it is incredibly short, like 102 pages. So it is theoretically a quick read, but it felt much longer than it was. I don't know. Like, just something about it just did not jive with me. And it was interesting in concepts, but the things that I liked about it weren't really what the focus was. It was really just a heavily thematic look at kind of where, if capitalism was allowed to run totally amok, a potential like doomsday scenario, if you will. So if you really like kind of theme-heavy sci-fi works, then I'd say that this is probably great. Like, it was very well written, and I could tell. But just, I don't know, it just felt very on the nose with the themes, but you only had 100 pages, so you kind of had to be, I don't know, just something about it didn't totally click, but I wasn't mad at it either. It was just fine. Now we are on to 3.75 star reads. So the first of these is The Forgetting Moon by Brian Lee Durfee. This is book 1 in the 5 Warrior Angels trilogy. And this one, I kind of feel bad because it was really on me in the way that I chose to consume this story. So I started it in October of 2022 as a purely audio listen, and it is very complex. There is a lot of places, a lot of names, a lot of fantasy jargon that's made up specifically for this world, and just trying to do that purely as audio was just not working for me because my primary audio time is when I'm at the bench doing research, doing like mindless pipetting, mindless tasks, kind of like that. And so like, obviously I'm like 80% to 90% listening and then 10 to 20% focused on what I'm actually doing. And so just, that did not work well for this story. So then I waited until I got a physical copy to continue it. And I decided I didn't want to restart. I just wanted to continue from where I had left off, and just like, I really did this book dirty. And so I now know when I go to book 2, The Blackest Heart, that I need to just start on physical. Like, maybe immersion would be okay, but purely audio is not going to work for this kind of complex story. So if you really want that massive POV, multiple characters, all of that kind of stuff, then The Forgetting Moon is great, especially if you're interested in looking at kind of themes around religion and in-world religious conflicts. I think it's interesting on that front. And so if those things sound good to you, I would highly recommend you check out The Forgetting Moon. And then my other 3.75 star read was a reread of The Last Wish by Andrzej Sapkowski. This is the first short story collection of the Witcher series. And I was reading this because Bethany from Beautifully Bookish Bethany and Leanna from Leanna's Library are doing a read-along as part of Bethany's like podcast channel. I'm not totally sure. I think it's called Chapter 3 Podcast. And so they are kind of hosting a read-along for The Witcher. And so I was like, oh, I want to reread The Witcher because I remember nothing about it. And it was fine. Like, it was a fun enough time. It had like fun retellings of very classic fairy tales. There was like Beauty and the Beast. There was just a lot of, it was just fun, but it wasn't anything like that I think will particularly stick with me. So I am excited to continue with The Witcher, and it was fun for what it was. Now we're on to my 4-star reads. And so the first 2 4-star reads are both mystery books that I wanted to try. So I recently watched Glass Onion on Netflix. It's a new mystery movie, and I had a lot of fun with it. And I know that it's classified as a isolated closed circle mystery. And so I asked the queen of reading isolated closed circle mysteries, Mara, for some recommendations on where to start the genre. And so she recommended to me the progenitor of the genre, if you will, And Then There Were None by Agatha Christie. And then she also recommended, if I wanted to try something newer, An Unwanted Guest by Shari Lopina. And they were both 4-star reads. They were like very fun. It felt like reading a game of Clue that was much more convoluted and complex. So it was just fun. Like, it was a nice way to break up all the fantasy. It was just a good old time. I don't know that they would necessarily like stick out as favorites of all time for me, but I think when I'm in the mood for like a mystery book, that I'll definitely continue reading other works from Agatha Christie, because I understand that I have a massive backlog of hers to get to. So I'm excited that I have opened this door to a new genre that I really enjoyed. And so I can't wait to see what else is in store for me from those kinds of books. Then my other 4-star read of the month, and this is where I'm probably, people are going to want to fight me, was Ship of Magic by Robin Hobb. This is book 1 of the Live Ship Trader trilogy, and I'll come right back to that. I'm getting a little bit of a wiggly princess here, so she's gonna go bye-bye, say bye. Okay, so I was ready to fight people in the streets about Ship of Magic. So I think Ship of Magic engaged me from the jump much more quickly than Farseer ever did. I really enjoyed Robin Hobb's character work. I think she writes very realistic feeling characters, for good and ill, because they can be very frustrating to read from, but they make sense to me. Like, I kind of get who these people are, and they never feel like cliche characters. They feel like real people in real situations. That being said, I think the line for everybody is obviously going to be slightly different. For me, Robin Hobb leans on the side of kind of doing graphic trauma on page for the sake of like eliciting feelings from her readers. And I imagine that maybe as I go along, as I complete this trilogy, there will be more catharsis as we go along. But I guess, I don't know, maybe I'm just trained from other types of books, but I'm used to having more payoff in the individual books than I think Robin Hobb ever gives. She really almost feels like she writes one big gigantic book that gets chopped up into 3 bits, because obviously you can't release like a 3,000 page book. That'd be obnoxious. And so I think it's maybe just like an expectation of mine from what I'm used to in stories. I don't think it's necessarily bad, but I think that we definitely sit with the negative feelings a lot. She's very good at eliciting strong rage, sadness, all of that kind of stuff, but I never find it completely balanced with the opposite of those emotions. I never feel elation or full catharsis or those really fist-pumping moments of people just overwhelmingly overcoming the odds against them. And I think she really focuses on a slow unfolding of dealing with trauma in a very realistic way. But for me, when I'm reading books, I don't necessarily want that as much. I kind of want to see these characters have this overwhelming triumph that we don't necessarily always get in real life. It's one of the things I love about books, and just don't think that Robin Hobb does that. But I also can really appreciate her realistic world building, realistic characters, realistic conflicts. Like, it feels real, but it just never really gives the payoff that I want as a reader. But I'm definitely going to continue my journey with Robin Hobb, and maybe I'll become a stan, because I think for Farseer, it was like a 3.5-ish star experience for the whole thing. And we're already starting Ship of Magic at like a 4-ish star experience. So who knows? Maybe by Tawny Man, I'll be screaming from the rooftops 5 stars and I'll want to reread. I don't know. But currently that's kind of where I'm at with Miss Hobb. But anyways, we'll just keep trucking along. So then my 4.25 star read of the month was The Price of Power by Michel. This is a new start to a self-published fantasy series. It is planned to be 5 books currently. And this one is 4.25 stars because for the first like 60-ish%, I was really just kind of trying to figure out what we were doing. There was kind of this dramatic prologue, but then we weren't really following anybody from the prologue anymore. And I just kind of felt like we were having a very slow burn getting to know these characters. The characters were all in really interesting circumstances. There was like a prince who is presumed dead turned drug dealer. There was a like crazy mystic grandma who wants to kill her grandson. There was a princess who has a cool ice tiger animal companion who wants to like prove herself worthy of her family name and undergoes like deadly trials. And then there's this kind of like farm boy type character who had an abusive childhood and is now kind of almost trying to commit suicide. So like they were really interesting POVs, but I was just like, how do these connect? What the hell is going on? But by the last, I don't know, 35-ish%, I would say, it was just like a page turner, exciting after exciting, and then you finally got to see all the connections. And so I would say that the payoff was really worth it, but just know that you're in for a very incredibly character-focused, slow burn start of the book. But some people love that. So I think if you really like character-focused narratives that turn into something really expansive and exciting, then it's great. Then next up, my 4.5 star read was The Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon. This is book 1 in the Roots of Chaos, because there is a new prequel coming out in February that I will be interested to see where it goes. But The Priory of the Orange Tree, I thought tried to do a lot in a very long book, but it almost felt like it could have really benefited from maybe being a duology or a trilogy to just really flesh out some of the stuff. So that's where the half star kind of got knocked down, because there was some aspects I wanted more of, because I thought it was such a cool situation. So basically in this world, we're following a bunch of different POVs. There's also a slow burn sapphic romance, and there's kind of looking at these competing kingdoms or countries where the ones in the West kind of have this relationship where dragons are evil, and they think that the bloodline of their ruling family keeps the evil dragon asleep to keep them safe. And so they always want this family to keep being on the throne. And then in the East, they have a more symbiotic relationship with their dragons, and they are dragon riders, and it's seen as a huge honor. And so there is some stirrings of maybe the evil dragon is waking up. So there's a lot of political stuff trying to get the different disparate nations to come together against this threat. There's also this like secret mage society kind of pulling strings in the shadows. And it was just so much fun. I really enjoyed it. I just wish that, especially towards the end, when kind of the major climax happened, that we just had a little bit more time with it. And so that's the only place where it kind of was like, oh, I kind of wanted more, but it still was so good. And I would highly recommend it if you really like dragons everywhere and hidden magic societies and politics and just all of it. Then I would say that it's a great book to pick up and try. Now we get to the hard part with all my 5-star reads. So of the novels that I read, 3 of them were 5 stars. 4 of them were 5 stars. Ooh, so what order do I want to put them in? I guess the lowest of the 5 stars would be Nolan by Michael J. Sullivan. This is book 1 in the Rise and Fall, which is the 3rd prequel series to the Priory Revelations. It follows 400 years after the events of the Legends of the First Empire, and the parts of this book that I liked the most was really just kind of seeing how already, even a few generations distant, the legends and the things that occurred in the Legends of the First Empire have already been twisted for political reasons. And some of the characters are very long living from Legends of the First Empire, so you get to see more of them, and you get to see their descendants, and it was just a lot of fun following off Legends and seeing more of this world. It was just a great time. I had so much fun with it. Then, ooh, my next 5-star read. I don't know. I guess, I don't know. Like, I'm gonna cop out and say these 3 all are phenomenal books, and that should tell you because one of these was a reread of a favorite of all time. And so that should give you some indication of how much I enjoyed these other 2 books. So next I'll talk about Tress of the Emerald Sea. I loved it. This is Secret Project 1 by Brandon Sanderson. It is just all the whimsy, all the like cozy fairy tale vibes. I have a full spoiler-free review video that I will link for you above and below if you want more of my spoiler-free thoughts. And then this weekend, Angela, Stephanie, Jesse, and I will have our spoiler-filled discussion as a live show. So if you want any more thoughts about Tress, check out those places. I also participated in a spoiler-filled chat with Elle over on her channel that I will link for you as well. So there is places for you to get all the Tress content. So I'll just move along. The next thing that I read, I buddy read this with my friend Jashana, and we read The Battle Drum by Sarah L. Arifi. This is book 2 in the Ending Fire trilogy. Book 1 was The Final Strife, which came out last year. And this doesn't come out till May, so I'm sorry. I know I read it really far in advance, but I saw the arc, I requested the arc came through, and then Jashana got it, and then 2 days later we had read the whole book. All I can say is, if you like epic adult fantasy where the world building and the lore feels almost like a mystery and a puzzle that you're kind of putting together as you go, where you're reading things and guessing and making all of those kind of predictions and theories and just that is The Battle Drum. The whole time, I really did not expect it to go the direction that it did after The Final Strife. The Final Strife feels very, I don't know, like maybe slightly older Hunger Games or something of that ilk. There's kind of a magical competition element, and at the very end, there's a dramatic reveal. And then where it went in The Battle Drum was just so good. And I don't know, I can't wait for more people to get their hands on it and to want to talk about it. But all I can say is, even if you didn't necessarily love all of the components of The Final Strife, I would say that The Battle Drum gets incredibly dark, and there are some serious content warnings. So if you are sensitive at all to violence of a sexual nature against women, then that happens on page, and it actually leads to an on-page miscarriage. So just be aware, like, content warnings galore. And I know that for some people, The Final Strife felt like kind of a weird juxtaposition of maybe like YA tropes with a very dark adult world. I would say The Battle Drum, firmly adult, just a fun time. So good. Not traditional medieval fantasy, not traditional like feudal systems. It was just so good. And I can't recommend it highly enough. Please read The Final Strife so you can be ready for May for The Battle Drum. The last book I'll talk about very briefly is I finished my reread of the Lord of the Rings trilogy. I read The Return of the King, and this is my first time ever doing audiobooks for Lord of the Rings. I've never done the original by, is it Ingalls? I don't remember. Rob Ingalls? Something, I don't know. But I did the Andy Serkis narrations, and they just brought like a whole another dimension of cozy vibes to this story. It's everything I would ever want, and I just always forget how much of this third book, like almost the back half, is kind of the denouement. It's like the resolutions of this journey and seeing how the characters have changed as they go back and visit where they came from. It's just everything I could ever want. And I'm just surprised that that part of Lord of the Rings never really seemed to catch on. There's not really a lot of books where you get that long unwinding of seeing how the characters have changed by the journey that they went on. And I so appreciate it. It's just so good. If you haven't read Lord of the Rings, do yourself a favor and immersion read it with the Andy Serkis narration, or if you're pure audio, that works too. But you should definitely involve Andy Serkis in your journey. And so that wraps up the novels and novellas that I read. So just briefly, I read Dark One. This is by a bunch of other authors, but it's a story I think originally helmed by Brandon Sanderson. It is a volume 1 of a graphic novel series. It kind of takes the portal fantasy genre and spins it where you're kind of following the evil character. And I just thought it was a lot of fun. I gave it 3.75 stars. I'm curious to see where it goes. It is very violent. I haven't heard really anybody else talk about it. It was just a fun time. It felt very tropey, but it also just felt interesting to see it from the perspective of the villain. And so I'm just, with some of the stuff that happened towards the end, I'm just really curious to see where it goes from here. And with that, that brings me to the 10 novels or volumes of manga that I got to. So I read the first 5 volumes of Witch Hat Atelier by Komome Shirahama, and then I also read the first 5 volumes of Yona of the Dawn by Mizuho Kusanagi. And so Yona of the Dawn is a little bit older. I think it's like very early 2000s, and it feels like it. In some of the novels, they kind of have that weird predatory gay almost, where you're just like a little bit uncomfortable. They say things a little bit aggressively, and it kind of paints it in a weird light. So that's like the one thing I would say is I didn't love, but I feel like we're ramping up to a fun epic fantasy. I really don't know where it's going, but I'm going to save more thoughts because I will be doing a full chat of the first 6 volumes of Yona with Elle over on her new channel, Full Meta Analysis. So I'll share that when it comes, but it is a very fun time. And so you have time to read those novels if you want to join us for that chat. And then Witch Hat Atelier, I also picked up because of Elle, and she has been screaming about it. And all I can say, it is as good as advertised. It really epitomizes what I think makes manga and anime so special. This ability to have this outlandish, very just silly, whimsical humor with some of the most like deep, moving, traumatic theming and things that happen to the characters. It just kind of blends those two things so well. And for somebody who, like me, who's seen a fair amount of anime and read a fair amount of manga, I got to see some of my favorites kind of recalled and given little nods to in this series. And I would just recommend it so highly. If you're interested in trying manga for the first time, I think this is a very friendly space to start because there's only 10 volumes currently available. And so you could read that really quickly and just kind of get a taste. It has so much going for it. And I would say that the art style is another level of detailed and more realistic than I'm used to seeing in the kind of early 2000s, late 90s manga that I grew up reading. And it just has the cozy, whimsical vibes of something like a Spirited Away feel or a Studio Ghibli feel, but then it also explores these really interesting themes and just great characters, adorable animal-ish companion, just so good. But I will hold back from gushing too much, and I just would really encourage you to check out Witch Hat Atelier if you feel so inclined. But that will do it for all of the books that I got to in the month of January. If you just want to leave an emoji, let's leave a crown or a king or a queen, something royalty related to go with the return of the king. If you want to leave a comment or have a little chat, let me know your favorite read from January, or if you've read any of these and want to talk to me about them. I'd love to hear from you in the comments down below. And like always, while you're down there, go ahead and hit like if you like this video, subscribe if you haven't already for more bookish shenanigans like this from moi. But other than that, I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll talk to you again soon. Bye!